Hello, we are moving on to finding the mean from a frequency table. But first, here's your starter. Pause the video, spend 5 minutes on these 4 questions, and then have a look at the solutions on the next slide. Here are the solutions, so pause the video, mark those off. Well done to everyone who submitted the exit ticket. There was a lot of right answers, so well done. We're just going to go through the answers very quickly. So question 1, if 4 numbers have a mean of 6, we know that they would have been added up, divided by 4, because there's 4 numbers, and that gave us the answer of 6. So to find the total of those numbers, we can do the 6 times by 4, because the total was divided by 4. So we can do the opposite to find out that the total was 24 of those numbers added together. So that is of the 4 numbers. Another number was added, so we now have 5 numbers, and the mean is now 5. So we can work out the total because the mean is 5, and we've got to times that by the number of numbers there were, and that gives me 25. So when I had 4 numbers, the total was 24. We added a number, and it became 25. So the number that must have been added was 1. So the answer to the first one was 1. Question 2. 5 numbers have a mean of 13. 4 of the numbers are 16, 20, 8 and 10. What's the 5th number? Well, if 5 numbers have a mean of 13, we know that mean equals all the numbers added together divided by how many there are. If the mean is 13, we know that there are 5 numbers. We can times by 5 on both sides, or do 13 times 5 to find what our total needs to be. So 13 times 5 gives me 65. And we know 4 in the numbers already, so those 4 numbers added up together give me 54. So I know 4 numbers added together are 54. The one that's missing, the 5th number, has got to be the difference between 65 and 54, which is 11. So really well done if you got both of those correct. So last lesson we looked at finding the mode, the median and the range from a frequency table. This time we're going to do find the mean, which is a little bit trickier. Before we jump straight in, let's have a look at a frequency table and what does this data represent. Let's just remind ourselves. So this is looking at the number of siblings, and frequency, remember, just means how many. So if I was to write out the list of this data, it says the number of people who have 0 siblings is 2, so 0 comes up twice. This 4 here means there were 4 people who had 1 sibling, so I'd have to write 1 4 times if I did my survey. The 1 here means how many, so 1 person had 2 siblings, so 2 would come up 1 time. The frequency here is 2, so 2 people had 3 siblings, so I'd write 3 twice. And this last one as well, 2 people also had 4 siblings. So that's what that data means in the frequency table. It's just put into a table, looks a little bit neater. So we've got to try and find the mean from that data. Remember, the mean is all the numbers added together divided by how many numbers there are. So when we just looked at that frequency table there, I said there was 2 people with 0 siblings, 4 people with 1 sibling, 1 person with 2, 2 people with 3, and 2 people with 4. So I could write that out like that and then add all the numbers together and divide by how many numbers there are. But let's say the frequency here was 200. I wouldn't want to have to write out 200 zeros and then add all of them up. So we're going to do this a little quicker way. Let's just notice if we added these numbers going from each bit, so 0 plus 0 would give me 0, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 would give me 4, 2 on its own would be 2, 3 plus 3 is 6, 4 plus 4 is 8. Or how could I have found these numbers here without having to write these numbers out here? Well, do we notice, well, 0 times 2 is equal to 0. Well, that matches up with this number here. 1 times by 4 gives me 4. Well, that 4 matches up with the 4 there. 2 times by 1 gives me 2. Well, that matches up with the 2 here. And as we carry on doing that, we can see that by timesing those columns together, we get the numbers we wanted instead of having to write them out. So that's going to be our first step when working out the mean. All the numbers added together. Well, we've got to get times across and then add all of those up. So the numbers I've now got to add up are 0, 4, 2, 6, and 8. So that's that top part of our equation. 8 plus 6 plus 2 plus 4 gives me 20. So I've worked out it's going to be 20 on the top. The bottom bit though says how many numbers there are in total. Well, we could count up, well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. That might take us a long time if there's a long list of them. Remember, frequency means how many, so we could look at the frequency column and add all of those up. So 2 plus 4 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 will give me how many numbers there are in total. So that's going to give me 11. So the mean equals 20, which was all those numbers times across and then added together, divided by the total number of numbers that there are, which is the frequencies added together, and that gives me 1.81. Remember to just double check, does that seem about right? Does 1.81 lie within the range of 0 to 4? Yes, so that seems about right. So let's just summarize that there. We're going to use this formula here when we're looking at frequency tables. It's doing exactly the same thing. It's just put in a nicer way so you can follow it easier. X is going to be whatever is in this first column here. So when at the top it says X times frequency, that was that first step doing 0 times 2, 1 times 4. And you're going to add all those numbers up that you get at the end. And the total frequency was we look at the frequency column and we add all of those up. Okay, so if you want the step-by-step method there, have a look at that, copy it out in your book if that's going to be helpful, or come back to this slide if you ever get stuck. So you've seen my example on the previous slide. Notice you can easily just put the times sign in the middle of the two columns instead of having to write it out again. I added an extra column onto my table for the x times f bit, so that's the top of this equation there. So I would recommend on your turn to add a little column here, x times f, f meaning the frequency and x meaning just whatever the question is asking about. So in our case it's the number of siblings, and fill out the numbers there, and you can add those up to find the top part of the fraction. Total frequency, remember, is all the frequencies added up together. So pause the video now, have a go at working out the mean of that frequency table on the right, and then click play when you have finished. So let's go through the answer together. So remember the top part of the fraction I'm going to do in this purple pen. X times the frequency. Well, X in our case is the number of siblings. So we can just put a times sign in between each of those and do those multiplications. 0 times 4, 7 times 1, 2 times 2, 4 times 3, and 4 times 4. And I've got to add all of those up because that's the same as adding up all the numbers. It's just a little bit quicker. So adding all these up gives me a total of 39. So far of my equation of mean, I've done the top half, which is adding all the numbers up together, and that's given me 39. The second part I'm going to do in red, the total frequency, so that's the bottom part of the fraction. Well, frequency is here, and I'm going to find the total frequency by adding up these numbers here. So 4, add 7, add 2, add 4, add 4. And that gives me a value of 21. And the final thing I need to do is just add that to the bottom here. So our mean is going to be 39 divided by 21, which gives me an answer of 1.857142. So you could round that if you wanted. Let's round it to one decimal place, 1.9. So the mean here means 1.9 siblings. So always try and put it into context. So the mean, or the average amount of siblings we had of those people we asked, were 1.9. That does seem about right because it lies between 0 and 4. So some practice questions here now. Remember, it was helpful to add that extra column on the end of our table, so x times by the frequency, so you could add that to the end. You're going to choose 5 of these questions to have a go at. So if you're feeling confident, go for the last 5. If you want a little easier, go for the first 5. Notice some of the questions look really similar. So for example, here and here, question 2 and 3, they both have the ages ranging from 10 to 13. The frequencies just change. So once you find the mean of some of these numbers, think about why maybe the mean has increased or decreased, okay? So pause the video now, give yourself 15 minutes to have a go at those. Okay, time's up, so have just pause the video now, mark those answers, then we'll have a look at a few together on the next page. So here I've just cut out question 1, 2, 3, 4 and their answers. Let's just have a look at each one. So question 1, we found the mean age was 10.5 years. What changed between here and here? Well, the frequencies stayed the same, 2, 2, 5 and 1. But the age increased by 1 on each of those things. So it doesn't surprise me that therefore then the age increased by 1 year, because all the frequencies stayed the same, but the ages just increased by 1. Looking from question 2 to 3, again, the ages have stayed the same, but the frequencies have changed. They've actually doubled each time, haven't they? The frequency has changed from age of 10 from 2 to 4, and 2 to 4 again, 5 to 10 and 1 to 2. But the mean actually stayed the same. Well, that's because the ages here haven't changed. If you thought the mean age would double, that would get us to 23. Well, 23 wouldn't seem like a correct mean age, seeing as we only looked at people from age 10 to 13. So even though the frequencies changed, that's not going to change the age because they stayed the same here. So we can see here how if we change some aspects, we can actually keep the same mean. And for example, when we change from 1 to 2, because the age is increased, so did the mean age. We've now got an exam question. This is taken from an exam paper. So give yourself 7 minutes to try and complete all parts of this here. Notice we're looking also at some parts that haven't been in this lesson but in previous lessons. Remember, modal is the same as mode. It's just a different word for it. Think about why maybe they've left this extra column blank for you. Give yourself 7 minutes, or if you complete it in less time, that's brilliant. Have a go at these 3 questions. Okay, time for the solution. 20 students scored goals for the school hockey team. The table gives information about the number of goals they scored. So just remember, this line here means that 9 students scored 1 goal, 3 students scored 2 goals, 5 students scored 3 goals, and 3 students scored 4 goals. So write down the modal number of goals scored. Modal means most common. And remember, when we have a frequency table, that means the highest frequency. So we can see the highest number of times something happened was 9 students and they scored 1 goal. So the thing that came up most often was 1 goal. So that should be your answer to the first question. The range of the number of goals, they've helped you here. Make sure you're going from this column here, the number of goals. Well, the range, remember, is the biggest, take away the smallest. But we're taking the numbers from the goal column, not the frequency, not the number of students. So the biggest number of goals I could have scored was 4. The smallest number of goals I could have scored was 1, so our range is 3 goals. Last part, work out the mean number of goals. So this is what we've been doing this lesson. So remember, step 1 is the x times the frequency. Well, frequency is this column here. Label that with F. The goals scored is our x. So remember, x just means the context of the question. So we can put a times sign in between each of those. 1 times 9 is 9, 2 times 3 is 6, 5 times 3 is 15, 4 times 3 is 12. So remember, mean equals the x times the frequency divided by the total frequency. So I've done x times frequency, but I need to add all of those numbers up, which gives me a total of 42. So I've got the top part of my fraction. The bottom part I've got to do is the total frequency. Well, I look at this frequency column here, and I'm going to have to add them up. So 9 plus 3 plus 5 plus 3, and that gives me a value of 20. So my mean is going to be whatever 42 divided by 20 is, which should give me 2.1. So that's 2.1 goals. Before I move on, does that seem a sensible number? Does 2.1 lie between 1 and 4? Yes, it does. So it seems like a sensible answer. So those are your answers. You've got all of them right. You've got 5 marks. Well done. Okay, to finish off today's lesson, you've got another exit ticket that you need to submit. So because we're doing some new content, it's a really good way for me to see how you're getting on. So give yourself the end of this lesson now, so about 10 minutes to answer this question. Make sure you take a picture of it, send it to me on Show My Homework. I'll also attach it as a separate document in case you want to send it to me electronically. That brings us to the end of the lesson. So don't forget to send me your exit ticket, and you have finished for today. Well done.